Fascism didn't rise on fear alone. It grew on jobs, debt, and the promise that, don't worry, the state will fix everything. When most people hear the word fascism, they picture marching soldiers, waving flags, and leaders shouting in crowded squares. But that was the stage show. Behind the curtain, the real engine wasn't military, it was economic. Dictators didn't just control people with guns, they controlled them with paychecks. This is the space of a financial historian, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing here is as simple as it looks from the outside. This is the story of how fascist leaders discovered a hard truth. The easiest way to buy obedience isn't terror, it's employment. And how a whole generation, desperate for security, slowly traded its freedom for a steady wage. The stage was already set by disaster. In the 1920s, Europe was exhausted. World War I had drained state coffers, destroyed factories, and wrecked currencies. In Germany, insane hyperinflation turned years of savings into something as worthless as wallpaper. In Italy, soldiers returned from the front to no jobs, no real income, and no sense of purpose. Democracies were young, fragile, and basically broke. Then came the crash of 1929. What the war had started, the markets finished. Unemployment shot above 30% across Europe. Farmers were producing food and still going hungry. Cities struggled to pay for basic fuel. In Berlin, people sold their furniture just to eat. In Rome, families stood in bread lines wrapped around squares that had once been built for emperors. Right in the middle of this chaos, a new kind of politician walked onto the scene. Not the more freedom type, the I'll give you order type. Hitler, Mussolini, Franco. They didn't rise because people loved dictators. They rose because people wanted life to stop falling apart. Their offer was simple. Give up some of your political freedom and I'll give you economic security. They understood something democracies were too slow to see. When money collapses, ideas stop being the main currency, security does. When Hitler took power in 1933, Germany was on its knees. 6 million unemployed, production cut in half, foreign investors gone. But within 3 years, unemployment had almost disappeared. From the outside, it looked like a miracle, the German economic wonder. To the world, it looked like genius. To ordinary Germans, it felt like salvation. The Nazi regime was building highways, opening factories, putting up stadiums, and advertising a people's car, the Volkswagen. Radio broadcast called it a national rebirth. But behind the show was a huge economic trick that changed history. The Nazis didn't stumble on some hidden pile of money. They basically invented it. They created secret credit instruments called MEFO bills, a kind of off-the-books IOU. Instead of borrowing openly from banks, the state forced private companies to accept these notes as payment. Take this now, we'll redeem it in real money later. On paper, it looked perfect. The government didn't seem heavily indebted. People had jobs, factories were running, optimism was back. But the fuel of this prosperity wasn't a peaceful economy. It was a war economy. Highways were designed for rapid troop movement. Factories that built Volkswagens could be flipped to building tanks in weeks. The jobs miracle was actually a rearmament program painted over with national pride. The real brilliance of the system was psychological. People didn't feel oppressed. They felt employed. Loyalty wasn't extracted with torture. It was paid every month. And when your income comes from the state, how free are you really? Across the Alps, Mussolini was playing his own Italian version of the same game. He didn't just promise jobs, he promised unity. After years of strikes, class conflict, and socialist agitation, he sold a third way. Not capitalism, not communism, something in between. He called it the corporate state. On paper, workers, employers, and the government would cooperate for the good of the nation. On the ground, it meant full control from the top down. Independent unions were shut down. Wages and prices were set by the state. Private companies still existed on paper, but survival depended entirely on loyalty to the regime. Every major sector answered to the fascist party. Propaganda kept repeating words like efficiency, order, discipline. Mussolini makes the trains run on time became a global cliché, the famous proof that fascism worked. But the numbers told another story. Productivity stalled, imports soared, debt ballooned. The regime spent huge amounts on public works, draining swamps, building monuments, launching big employment schemes. It all looked impressive, but the country simply couldn't afford it. To keep the illusion alive, statistics were massaged and foreign debt was stacked higher and higher. Italy's miracle wasn't real growth. It was branding. Just like a company faking profits for investors, the fascist state polished its books for the world. In Spain, Franco took notes from both of them. After a brutal civil war, he promised economic self-sufficiency. Spain would depend on no one. Sounds strong. In reality, it was a disaster. Foreign trade was restricted, industries were nationalized, and almost everything from food to fuel was rationed. State-owned enterprises became people's lifeline. To get a job, a loan, or a house, you needed loyalty before you needed skill. The black market became the only real market. Production collapsed. Hunger spread. Yet Franco ruled for nearly 40 years. Because even when the economy failed, the loyalty mechanism still worked. Scarcity itself had become a tool of control. Different countries, different flags, same formula. Debt, jobs, propaganda, control. These regimes didn't just repair their economies, they rewired their citizens. Work became loyalty, production became pride, opposition became unemployment, exclusion, or treason. Economic dependence turned into a soft weapon of dictatorship. You don't need a bullet if you control the bread. By the late 1930s, the surface looked shiny. Unemployment was low, factories were busy, national pride was high. Seen from a distance, fascism looked like a cure for capitalism's chaos. But it wasn't a cure, it was a conversion. The invisible hand of the market had been replaced by the iron hand of the state. Every factory, every field, every paycheck was pulled into one basic equation: obey and you get stability. That was the real genius of fascist economics. Not efficiency, control. They knew fear only works for so long. Dependency lasts much longer. The worker whose livelihood depends on the state doesn't revolt easily. He votes, salutes, or stays silent to survive. First, jobs. No regime can survive on ideology alone, so they turned having a job into a moral duty. Remember the Nazi slogan, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free. In reality, it tied labor not to freedom, but to the leader. Then, debt, public works, rearmament, subsidies, all gave the feeling that prosperity was back. But much of that money wasn't earned. It was borrowed, printed, or hidden in creative accounting. Finally, propaganda. Every economic move was wrapped in words like nation, honor, and destiny. The state didn't just buy people's silence, it bought their belief. People stopped seeing themselves simply as workers. They saw themselves as participants in a grand national story. They weren't just clocking in, they were rebuilding greatness. And when you think you're building the future, you don't notice the chains on your hands. The so-called Nazi economic miracle is still sometimes presented as a success. It shouldn't be. Yes, unemployment fell, but wages stagnated, prices rose, unions were outlawed, strikes became treason, and real income declined. The regime threw distractions at people. Cheap radios, parades, state-subsidized holidays, strength through joy trips. Entertainment became anesthesia. In Mussolini's Italy, the pattern was the same. The regime claimed to have united worker and boss under one patriotic banner. In reality, it killed competition with quotas and replaced choice with obedience. Every worker was folded into a state-controlled corporation, where wages, hours, and roles were dictated from above. The market was gone, the state had replaced it. When war finally came, the obedience machine shifted gears easily. Workers didn't need to be convinced to make weapons. They were already conditioned to see production itself as a virtue. That's how you build an army before the first battle, by turning the whole economy into a loyalty assembly line. The uncomfortable part is this. This kind of economic control didn't vanish in 1945. It evolved. Modern governments learned a similar lesson. You don't always need open repression to keep people in line. You can do a lot with jobs, credit, subsidies, and debt Today, the relationship between state and citizen looks less like a partnership and more like a payroll system. The emotional chain fascists built with propaganda is now built with interest rates, social programs, and government-backed employment. If your loan depends on central bank policy, your savings depend on inflation, and your job depends on state-funded projects. How independent are you really? You don't always need censorship if compliance has become the safer, more profitable option. Across the world, governments are pulling old economic levers in new packaging. When growth slows, we hear about stimulus, relief packages, infrastructure drives, job guarantees. People cheer because stability feels good, but often what's created isn't real, long-term wealth. It's another layer of debt. Work is no longer always a space of personal freedom. It's increasingly an extension of policy. Whole industries survive not because they're efficient or innovative, but because they are politically useful defense, energy, surveillance, mega infrastructure. When the state is at the same time employer, investor, and regulator, you don't really have an open system. You have a hierarchy, and hierarchies don't reward freedom. They reward obedience. The fascists understood that. Modern systems risk forgetting it. You don't have to silence every voice if you quietly control people's livelihoods. Hunger and insecurity are powerful silencers on their own. So the economic lesson of fascism isn't just about old history, it's about human nature. People don't support strong leaders because they love tyranny. They do it because they're afraid of chaos. When economies fall apart, people will trade almost anything for stability, their savings, their rights, even their voice. That's why fascism worked for a time. It didn't sell pure ideology, it sold insurance, and the premium was freedom. Today, the biggest economies in the world run on similar emotional fuel. Governments promise protection from crisis. Markets assume they'll be rescued in every crash. Citizens ask for jobs and stability before they ask for reform. Debt grows, real productivity lags, and the illusion of prosperity continues so long as belief holds. Because what really holds the modern world together is not gold, not oil, not even the dollar. It's belief. Belief that the system will keep paying, that the state will keep printing, that someone somewhere is still in control. History warns what happens when that belief breaks. When the state and the economy fully merge, there's no one left to call out the lie. The line between policy and propaganda disappears. Numbers stop reflecting reality, and sooner or later the bill arrives. Just like it did in 1939. Fascism didn't begin with violence in the streets. It began with budgets, with promises of jobs, loans, and public projects to end the chaos. And for a while, it worked. Trains ran, factories hummed, flags waved. Then the money ran out. A system kept alive by debt needed something new to consume land, labor, other nations. The final stage of fascist economics wasn't stability, it was expansion and war. When there was nothing left to borrow, the regime started borrowing lives. The warning is simple and timeless. When the promise of security becomes permanent, policy freedom becomes temporary. Any empire that buys obedience with paychecks eventually pays for it in blood. And any democracy that runs entirely on debt, credit, and state guarantees, but stops questioning how that system works, quietly drifts toward the same pattern, not with boots and banners, but with loans, subsidies, and salaries. Because economic control doesn't always come in uniform. Sometimes it wears a suit, smiles, talks about growth, jobs, and opportunity, and hands you a contract. You sign it, and by the time you realize what you traded, your freedom is already gone. If this shifted your perspective even a little, there are many more stories worth hearing. History already holds the answers. The real question is, where are you looking?